Susan May Warren spent 8 years in Russia as a missionary before settling in Minnesota to become a full-time writer. Now she's an award-winning author, and she joins us today to share her story. Susan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
On
it's great
Harvest.
to be here.
Now, Chuck was kind of teasing. You weren't actually an undercover agent. You were a missionary. So
I'm really not allowed to say anything.
You're not allowed.
I'm not allowed to talk about that. No,
So,
I was actually a missionary, though.
So why Russia? What kind of got this started?
Well, you know, when I was young, the Lord just put in my heart that desire to be a missionary. And I gravitated towards those stories about people behind the Iron Curtain, Christians that were, you know, smuggling Bibles in and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So as a child, my imagination was ignited for that. But I knew that God had called me into missions as a child. But I kind of didn't want to be a missionary. I thought, well, that's not really for me. I don't want to go to a foreign land, and I wasn't interested in that. But God wouldn't let go. And so finally, I met my husband, and we got married, and he wanted to be a missionary as well. And we went to Moody Bible Institute, and well, actually he did. I got my Put Hubby Through degree, and during our last year, that's when the commission started. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it was an organization in the early 90s that went into Russia, and they taught Bible and ethics curriculum in the school system. So we went in as organizers there and helping people, and we were there with them for 4 years with the Navigators, and then we were, again, another term with Send International.
Now, how did, you know, being a missionary abroad maybe change not only your idea of America, but of the world? I used to say, you know, America's kind of like Disneyland, and most Americans don't realize. Of course, Disneyland is, you know, gotten kind of roughed up over the last decade. But anyway, you know, like, how did your perspective of not just America but the world change in being a missionary? Well,
I certainly was thankful for my time because it gave me a bigger view of the world. I realized that people all over the world just want the same thing. We want to be loved. We want to provide for our family. We want to be able to be safe.
Yeah.
We need to be redeemed. All of us are sinners, no matter who we are, what nationality. So and I had very good Russian friends. I mean, I just loved my Russian friends. So for me, that barrier started to die, and I really just saw them as my fellow brothers and sisters, and really became much more aware of the fact that we're kind of all in this together, and how can I reach out to them. And so it gave me a global perspective on things, and really took down the barriers of Americans versus Russians.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously the Orthodox Church has been thriving in Russia for many, many years.
Yes.
But how is Western Christianity accepted there?
I think it's becoming more accepted. When we first went over there, it was, you know, definitely, we were working with the Russian Baptist Church, which was the underground church that became not underground after communism fell.
Yeah.
So we were trying to help them start churches and expand, and they just did. I mean, it just exploded over there. Yeah. Ukraine more than where we were, but just still, it was very much of a awakening over in Russia. And slowly they started to kind of work together. But, you know, Orthodox Christianity over there is still the main religion, and it's still very strong. But the Evangelical branch, so to speak, is starting to grow. And there's actually, you know, quite a few very vibrant churches over there now.
Now, do these kind of different branches of Christianity work together at all, you know, the Orthodox and the Evangelical?
I think they're starting to.
Yeah.
It definitely has taken time.
Yeah.
They had to learn to trust each other, which I think is a really hard thing. But they're getting there, and I would say that they have the respect for each other.
Yeah. So how did you were a missionary for 8 years, and then all of a sudden you go to Minnesota and start writing novels. How does that transition happen?
Well, that was kind of a strange thing. I actually never thought I would be a novelist. I was always a writer. Loved to write. I loved to write our newsletters and short stories. And when I was in Russia, I know this is going to sound weird, but I was homeschooling my kids, and my husband was church planning, and so I didn't have a lot to do in the evenings after they went to bed. He was often gone, so I wrote a novel.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do that, but I never dreamed I would be a novelist. Well, in our last term that we were over there, the Lord started to, I wrote 4 novels while I was over there and never really submitted them because I thought, well, I'm in Russia, what am I going to do, right? And so, but I just enjoyed doing it. But at our last year, I happened to submit one small novella to Tyndale House, and they accepted it. And what I didn't know was that God was moving us from Russia to America and closing the doors to where we were working. We lived in Far East Russia, in a city called Habarovsk, and they closed the opportunity to get visas during when we came home for furlough our second time. So we weren't allowed to go back, and as a result, we kind of thought, well, maybe God's closing the door on that. Prayed about it. God sent us to northern Minnesota to kind of work in this little town, and during that time, that's when my novel life kind of just exploded, and suddenly I had all these books that I was writing, and it just was a real quick transition that we didn't plan, but God did.
In this current novel, You Don't Know Me, your lead character does go through the witness protection program.
Yeah.
Obviously from her time as a Russian
Right.
spy.
And all personal, real events, yeah.
But to a certain extent, as Christians, aren't many of us in the witness protection program? We've got a little bit of this hidden identity that we don't want to reveal to the world.
Yeah, I think we are exactly that, and I try to address that idea that secrets kind of hurt us as we hang on to them, because what happens is they dig around inside of us, and we want to tell people our secret, but we don't necessarily know how. And that happens to us in our communities today, right? We're Christians, we're sitting on the plane with somebody, we want to tell them, they're talking about something, they're obviously challenged in some way in their life. We have answers, we want to share them with them, but we don't necessarily know how, because we're afraid, right? We're afraid they're going to point fingers at us or judge us or blame us or whatever it is. And so we hold back instead of sharing that. And so, yes, I do believe that that's accurate.
So how do you for you're on the airplane, you're sitting next to somebody, and this situation is playing out. How do you, break through that?
That is a hard thing. I've always...
Even for a missionary.
Even for a missionary. I'm not a natural, hey, let me share the 4 spiritual laws with you kind of person. I'm more of a, let me get to know you. And then as you begin to trust me, I kind of share with you a little bit more about my life, and I might say, well, I'm a novelist and I write for the inspirational market, which is really a market that talks about truth. And I try to put truth into my stories, and I try to tell people that there are answers and where to look for those answers. And then often that will open up a door where I can say, well, for me, and I found that those words, for me, I have found that, and then I can share my testimony. And as long as I'm not telling them what to believe, but rather telling them about my own experience, that's sort of accepted. And then they can kind of carry that with them.
Now, those are the good secrets people have inside, but there's a lot of people sitting at home that are saying, well, I'm a Christian, but I feel like the secrets that I'm hiding inside aren't the kinds of things I want to... In fact, I want to make sure nobody knows about this. I wish I were in the witness protection program like Annalise. And your story is not just about her slipping into witness protection. It's about second chances, isn't it?
Absolutely. What happens is that she holds on to this secret, and she doesn't think that her husband will love her, of course, if she tells him who she really is. So she doesn't tell anyone for 20 years. And one day she walks into the coffee shop, and there sits her witness security agent, and he's going to move her. He says, the guy that you put in jail is out to get you. And she says, well, I can't move. I live in this town. Nobody knows who I really am. I haven't told my husband. He's running for mayor. My children are involved in the school system. I have a life here. I don't want to leave. And he's like, well, you're going to have to do something because you're going to get killed if you don't. So now she's confronted with, what do I do? And I think everybody has that sense of, I have secrets in my life that if I tell the people I love, they won't love me anymore. And, especially, we even think we can hide secrets from God. Well, if I confront that, God's not going to really love me. And that's really what she's dealing with is, can God redeem her mistakes? Can God still give her the good life that she wants, even if she acknowledges that she has these secrets? And so we talk a lot about whether or not secrets are good to keep in marriage. Should we tell our spouse the truth about us, or should we keep it to ourselves? And it's really about how secrets are so destructive to intimacy between husband and wife and between person and God.
Now, like I mentioned, you've written several books. This isn't certainly not your first novel. In fact, you're an award-winning writer. What advice would you give to somebody who maybe is an aspiring writer? I think that we think of writing as a very glamorous profession, which, of course, every profession that seems glamorous has kind of its side that's totally not glamorous. But what advice? Because I was reading an article a couple months ago where, especially novelists, now it's become so competitive that these people are writing several thousand words a day.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
What advice would you have?
Well, first of all, it's not glamorous. It's you sitting in sweatpants in a chair in your room by yourself for hours talking to yourself. So that's not super glamorous.
Yeah.
But no one else is going to write the novel but you, so you're going to have to get that done.
Yeah.
But I always tell people if they want to write a novel, first of all, they have to figure out what kind of novel they want to write. You know, so look at what they already read. And then you have to figure out what your novel is about. And so you have to think about the theme and the question that you're going to be asking in your novel. And then you have to sort of read other novels to see how it's crafted. You know, every story has an arc, so understand that. And then really it's about just sitting down and doing the work.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't write itself. You don't lay your head on the pillow and the next day there comes pages. I mean, there's many days where I'm writing 4,000, 5,000 words a day, and that's really normal for most authors that I know. So it's just eating the elephant every day. So
This may be a last kind of silly question, but do you ever, when you're writing, you know, maybe bring somebody back to life that they died back on page,
for
you know,
sure,
127?
for sure. Or you insert someone new that you like better than the person that you're actually writing about. I'll be like, oh, I like him better. I want to write about him. You know. And so yeah, it constantly happens, and you have to just always say, well, no, he's dead. He's gonna have to stay
you
dead.
move on.
So real quick, God has made you a missionary. He's made you a novelist. Where do you think he's taking you next?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I've been enjoying helping other people learn how to write. I do that a lot, where I'll speak and teach people how to write, because I think that we have, especially as Christians, we have something to say, and we've been armed with the truth, and everybody has a different way to share that. And so if someone wants to be a novelist or a writer, I try to help them put that talent to work and help them to be a good steward of that. So I'm enjoying that.
Well, that's funny, because if somebody wants to be in TV, I usually discourage them entirely.
You don't want to sit here. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks
The
for
story
having me.
is You Don't Know Me with Tyndale House. To connect with Susan or to find a copy of the book, Susan May Warren, you can go to susanmaywarren.com, or as always, you can go to our website, harvest-tv.com, and click on the show info button in the menu bar for an easy way to connect with Susan. Harvest will continue in just a moment.